The Tech 3 destroyers are some of the most unusual and unique ships that you can fly in EVE Online. Each of them have 3 activatable modes: propulsion mode, defensive mode and sharpshooter mode, that you can swap between at will. This does more than just update the visuals of the ship, but also fundamentally alters how the vessel operates. Most ships require you to understand the vessel and the fit that you are using, but the Tech 3 destroyers demand that you also master when it's best to use each of the 3 activatable modes. In this video, I'm going to be showcasing the Tech 3 destroyer for the Minmatar Republic, the Svipul. We're going to undock this and take it into a Class 2 wormhole ratting site, and I'm going to showcase how this little ship can run these sites really quite effectively. Do be aware I am also going to show a monumental mistake I made, so stay tuned to watch me get blapped. Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and let me introduce you to the Minmatar Republic's Svipul. The Svipul is actually a really interestingly named ship. Svipul in Norse mythology, as so many Minmatar ships are named after, was a Valkyrie that's mentioned a couple of times in the Poetic Edda. Intriguingly enough, the word Svipul in Old Norse also means changeable, and given everything we know about the Tech 3 destroyers, well, that seems rather fitting. Now, the configuration you're looking at here is the Svipul in its sharpshooter mode. In propulsion mode, it is much more horizontal, but once it goes into sharpshooter, the front end dips down into this vertical positioning and the 2 wings open up on the side. If we were to look at the defensive mode, it's very similar to the sharpshooter mode, but those wings kind of tuck in at the sides. This means that the Svipul is actually the most extreme, visually, of the Tech 3 destroyers, with the Jackdaw coming in a close second. Very easy to see which mode it's currently operating in. This is a contrast to the Hecate and Confessor, which are much more similar between their 3 activatable modes. Personally, I find that disappointing, but anyway. Now, the Svipul is a very popular choice for wormhole ratting. You can take it out into C2 wormhole sites, as we're going to do today, but it is also very popular for the C13 Wolf Riot wormholes. That is a topic we will cover in another video. It really deserves its own video, and I'll probably showcase both the Svipul and the Confessor in that, because they are both very popular choices for that. But today we're going to be looking at standard C2 ratting, nice and easy to get into, and as I teased out in the intro, I'm also going to be showcasing a monumental mistake I made that actually cost me the ship. So we're going to kind of look at this as a how to fly it and how not to fly it at the same time. If you do enjoy this video, please do take a moment just to hit like on it. Really helps the channel out, and drop a comment down below letting me know what you're enjoying in EVE Online at the moment, or if you fly the Svipul, what you're enjoying about this ship. What do you like about this? What do you use it for? I would love to know. If you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel and keep me making content like this, you can do so by heading over to my Patreon page, my PayPal tip jar, or my Redbubble merchandise store, all of which are linked in the description down below. Otherwise, with all that said and done then, let's introduce you to the Minmatar Republic's Tech 3 destroyer, the Svipul. Before we can showcase the fit that I'm going to be using for this demonstration, we need to understand the tactical destroyers and how they actually operate. Now, like most ships, they do get bonuses from a particular skill, notably the Racial Tactical Destroyer skill. You will need to have trained into the equivalent Racial Destroyer up to Tech 5, therefore you need to have Minmatar Destroyer 5 before you can start training into Minmatar Tactical Destroyer. It's also worth noting that obviously these are Tech 3 ships, which means an Omega account status is required in order to pilot them. Now, interestingly enough, these have, of course, a bonus that scales from the Minmatar Tactical Destroyer skill. They also have a MISC bonus, then we have the activatable modes, and I need to, really put into you before we go any further, these all stack. Which means if you are fully trained in, say, Minmatar Tactical Destroyer, and then you look at some of the other bonuses, yes, they do add on top of each other, which can make for some truly insane situations, as you'll see in a moment. First of all then, Minmatar Tactical Destroyer skill, 5% bonus, or 25% at full training, to small projectile turret damage, 10% or 50% to small projectile turret optimal range, nice, especially since we're going to be showcasing artillery here, where that optimal range really helps, and a 5% or 25% reduction in module heat damage amount taken. That skill alone is really useful for people like me, who like to overheat and forget that they've put the overheat right on. It means that you are less likely to burn your modules to a crisp before you go, oh yeah, I overheated that, I should probably turn that off. And you'll actually see me do that later, because overheating on this can be incredibly useful, and that reduction to the amount of damage that it causes, oh, chef's kiss. Anyway, so we then have misc bonuses, not roll bonuses, confusingly, misc bonuses, but hey, there we go. First of all, a 33% flat bonus to small projectile turret damage. Again, that is in addition to the 5 to 25% you get from the Minmatar Tactical Destroyer skill as well. This means you can get some really nice actual damage coming straight out of this. Notice it's damage, not rate of fire. This does favour artillery quite nicely as well. Then we have a 95% reduction in Scan Probe Launcher and Survey Probe Launcher CPU requirements. It's almost like this is a ship that we're going to be using whilst going through J-Space and wormhole systems, and they kind of knew that when they gave it its bonuses. Now, we then, in addition to the MISC and Minmatar Tactical Destroyer, as it says here, we get additional bonuses while any one of the 3 Tactical Destroyer modes are active. Modes may be switched no more than once every 10 seconds. Essentially, when you activate a mode, there is a 10-second cooldown before you can swap it into a different mode. Now the first one we'll look at then is Defense Mode. 33.3% bonus to all shield and armor resistances whilst Defense Mode is enabled, and a 66% reduction in the Micro Warp Drive signature radius penalty. Now this, when you use a Micro Warp Drive, remember it blossoms out your signature radius. So it increases your signature radius by 200-300%, however much it is. This reduces that bloom. It's still going to cause bloom, and it doesn't quite work out as speed tanking, but it does mean that if you're trying to close range with a Micro Warp Drive, or trying to, increase range with a Micro Warp Drive, you're not going to be taking so much damage on the way out. You're not going to make yourself such a big target. And you get those beautiful bonuses to shield and armor resistances, 33% across the board to shield and armor. Again, it's worth noting the Svipul can be comfortably tanked either shield or armor. This particular fit will be using armor, but we'll see that later. Propulsion mode up next. 66% bonus to Afterburner and Micro Warp Drive speed boost, and a 33.3% bonus to ship inertia modifier. Essentially that inertia modifier is going to allow you to realign or tighten an orbit nice and quickly, and the 66.6% speed increase means that an Afterburner, for example, if I were to showcase a bit of maths on this, if you had an Afterburner that was going to improve your flight velocity by 150%, well, 66.6 or 2/3 of 150% is 100%. So 150 plus 100 is 250% speed bonus from that Afterburner, and obviously an even bigger boost from Micro Warp Drives. Basically, propulsion mode, as you might expect from the name, is the mode you activate when you get the zoomies. We then finally have Sharpshooter mode, 33% bonus to small projectile turret tracking speed, 33.3% bonus to small projectile turret damage, which again stacks with the MISC bonus and the tactical destroyer bonus. You get big damage in Sharpshooter mode. A 100% bonus to sensor strength and targeting range, so you can lock at much further ranges, and we get a 66.6% increased resistance against hostile sensor dampeners and weapon disruptors. Not so useful for us here in PvE, but if you're taking a Svipul out into PvP, essentially this means that anyone using sensor dampeners is going to have a harder time trying to shorten your range and your locking range and your lock time. Whereas anyone using weapon disruptors is also going to have a difficult time trying to reduce your tracking or your optimal range and fall-off range. Essentially, Sharpshooter mode turns you into a Minmatar sentry gun. It allows you to play out all your little fantasies of wanting to be a low-sec gate gun, and it is just so much fun. Anyway, that's the roll bonuses and the skills. Let's now have a look at the fit. When fitting a tactical destroyer, it's important to note that on the left-hand side of the fitting screen here, you can swap between the different activatable modes to see how they affect the statistics of the ship on the right-hand side. Now, because I'm going to be going around the different aspects of this fit, I will change the tactical mode accordingly in order to best showcase and demonstrate what the fit is capable of. So starting off then with the high slots, because we're going to be looking at the weaponry, I'm in Sharpshooter mode, and you can see this gives us a whopping DPS of 158. That's with artillery, remember, which normally has very low DPS and high alpha. And certainly we've got over 1,000 hit points worth of alpha damage. This is using currently Tremor S, which is the long-range Tech 2 ammo. If we have a look at the high slots, I'm currently running 280mm Howitzer Artillery IIs, again with Tremor S loaded. So that 158 DPS, or 1040 Alpha Strike, is at an optimal range of 36 kilometers, which is just madness. We've got a fall-off range then of 47, and then we can go obviously beyond that and still do decent damage, because this is artillery, and we've got a 96 kilometer lock range, which is frankly insane. The other high slots are a prototype cloaking device so that we can cloak up in a wormhole if required, and then currently a Core Probe Launcher 1, which is offline. If I were to try and put this online, you'll see that there's not quite enough power grid on this ship in order to do so, so we have it offline but still fitted so that we can swap to it when needed. It's easy just to offline a couple of the other modules, activate the probe scanner, then we can scan down what we need to if we get caught in a wormhole that collapses behind us, for example, and then we can move around freely. Once we're done with the probe scanner, you deactivate it and reactivate your weaponry, that kind of thing. Ultimately, I really like this layout. We do need to have the Artillery 2s here because we want both the Tremor and Quake ammunition. That Tremor gives us massive range, which really helps us with kiting our enemies as far as possible. Essentially, we can keep out of their range whilst they're still within ours, and we're applying DPS at a decent range, which is honestly quite astonishing considering this is a destroyer. If we swap to Quake, then the damage does increase quite dramatically, but the range, conversely, is drastically reduced. It's about 6 kilometers of optimal range, and I think it goes out to 15 or 16 kilometers of fall-off when using Quake, but that's very useful when we're getting up close and personal to one of the battleships, getting under their guns, and we just want to punch them as hard as possible to break their tank as quickly as possible. Now, because we're going to be looking at the mid slots next, I'm going to move into propulsion mode, and you get the lovely little animation here as well as it shifts between the different modes. Now, first of all then, we need some propulsion. A Shadow Serpentis 1 meganewton Afterburner. You can try and cram in a 1 meganewton Afterburner 2 here, but honestly, the Shadow Serpentis, to me, it's fairly cheap, and it just felt like the better option. We want to maximize our propulsion to the best of our capabilities, because we want to be able to modulate our range quickly and efficiently. In an ideal circumstance, I would have actually put a micro warp drive here rather than a 1 meganewton afterburner, a 5 meganewton micro warp drive. However, again, the fitting of the ship here, the power grid and the CPU simply do not support that. You cannot cram one in without making major sacrifices elsewhere in the fit, so we're going for a 1 meganewton's Shadow Serpentis afterburner instead. And this does give us a pretty respectable navigation speed here, 850.3 meters per second with that activated. Of course, we can overheat that for 1146 as well, and remember, we get a reduction to the damage caused by overheating, so that is a completely viable tactic in order to just to push the range that little bit further. That is with propulsion mode on. Obviously, we are mostly going to be in sharpshooter mode. It should be noted that going into defensive mode as well does allow us to come at a bit of a different distance and take less damage, but most of the time we will be in propulsion mode when we're trying to get those ranges. Because we're going to be fighting at range and targets with traversal can be difficult to hit, we are of course going to be running a Target Painter 2 here for that additional sort of range and that on it, just to make sure that we are getting as close to the optimal here as possible. Remember, I'm running at about 36 kilometers optimal on the targets with the artillery, so a 40 kilometer optimal range on the Target Painter 2 means it's doing its job at the range that we're ideally going to be sitting at. We are cap stable here, good, nice capacitor stability. This is afforded to us with a Thukker small cap battery and with a cap recharger too. Nice and stable means a little bit of neuting doesn't cause us too much in the way of problems at all. Going into defensive mode then, to have a look at the low slots here, we are armor tanking this thing so that we can still have that propulsion, we can have cap stability, and we can get a bit of application assistance. In the low slots then, we have a Coreli B-type small armor repairer, 155 HP repaired every 4.8 seconds. That's pretty nice, that's a decent stat there. If we overheat that, it becomes 164 every 4 seconds basically, which is again a lot lot of repping there, and you'll actually see me use that in the combat demonstration later on. Next to this, I have a Multispectrum Energized membrane. This is the passive version of these because, again, I want to keep cap stable to the best of my ability. You can go for one of the activated ones here if you really want that extra, but we're getting some really nice resistances across the board here. Anyway, 90% electromagnetic resistance. Our lowest is 61% kinetic and 69% explosive, 75% on thermal, and then 90% on electromagnetic. To me, that's enough. That's more than enough. You don't really need to push that up any higher than it already is. And again, we actually get some pretty nice shield resistances despite not being shield tanked. Final two low slots then, Gyrostabilizer IIs, just to get that little bit of extra punch in there, giving us, again, we're out of sharpshooter mode now, so the DPS has dropped right the way down, but again, it's a decent amount whilst we're now in survival mode, basically. We're still able to apply at range good amounts of DPS. Let's shift it back into sharpshooter mode though, just because I like how the wings open up here. Finally then, for the rig slots, we're looking at a small explosive armor reinforcer 2 in order to pull up the armor resistances on explosive, and then 2 small auxiliary nano pumps in order just to push up that small armor repairer to the best of our ability. The aim of this, as I said, is essentially to keep range on the target, kite effectively where possible. There are going to be some battleships in these anomalies. You are going to want to close range with those as quickly as possible. That's where you drop into propulsion mode, you overheat the afterburner, and push in as quickly as you can in order to get under that ship's guns. Now, ultimately, it is worth noting that even if I go back into defense mode here, we only have a maximum of 7,030 effective hit points. As you'll see in a moment, it is entirely possible that some of those battleships will do even more than that. So manual piloting and understanding what your ship is capable of are absolutely vital. Anyway, enough of me hinting about the combat section. Let's actually showcase this in action. First the mistakes, then the fixing. So first of all, we're going to be jumping into a C2 wormhole ratting site called a perimeter hangar. I've already pulled up the stats on EVE Survival, I know kind of what I'm doing, but we're going to jump in and I'm going to show you how not to do this, because a lot of people told me what I'm about to show you is how you should run this site, and I'm going to explain why this is bad. But the first thing you should do, and genuinely you should do this, warp in at 0, drop your mobile tractor unit, lock onto everything, bookmark your MTU. The reason we use an MTU is to bring all of the loot close together. By bookmarking it, we have a nice easy warp in point if we have to warp away for whatever reason. We can also come back to that bookmark later on and use that for salvaging, for example, so I'm just going to bookmark that. Now, the first wave of the perimeter hangar has 3 cruisers called Awakened Patrollers. These are your triggers, they need to be left alive. If the 3rd Awakened Patroller dies, wave 2 spawns. We also have 2 frigates, Emergent Watchmans. These have neutralizers, they are not triggers, we can quite gladly kill them, and we probably should because that neutralizer can cause issues. So what I'm doing here, what I've been told is the best way to run these with a sniping build, is to drop the MTU then orbit around it. And so far for the Emergent Watchmans, that does appear to be somewhat working, because they're nice and close. I can use Quake within optimal range pretty much and just blap those ships nice and quickly. But those Awakened Patrollers, they're not within optimal range of Quake. In fact, they're beyond fall off of Quake, so I need to swap to Tremor. But now that I'm orbiting, oh look at that, suddenly we're back in the fall off of Quake again with the Awakened Patroller because it's moving a bit closer and we're just not getting good hits with it. You can see very little damage going there, so maybe I should change the orbit. If I orbit a little bit further away, then I can keep these at range and just worry about, using the Tremor, right? This is another strategy that's been suggested to me. Use Tremor and just orbit everything from massive range. And it just, again, doesn't really work, especially because you're so far out that when you change orbit onto the next ship, you absolutely sacrifice all of your traversal. And if I can impress any one thing onto you in this demonstration, it is that traversal is king. Your angular velocity to your targets is more important than anything else. If you aren't angled to a target, you are going to have a bad time. You can see I'm taking a decent bit of damage by trying to move in, trying to move out, even going in a straight line. I'm just not getting the good hits on this at this point in time. It's not really working, but it gets worse. Constantly adjusting my range, coming in and out of optimal and fall off and all that kind of thing because of how the orbits completely screw with everything, has meant this first wave has taken a long time, like genuinely a lot longer than I would have liked it to. Ultimately, we are now finally on the final awakened patroller of wave 1. Once I kill this, wave 2 is going to spawn, and wave 2 is where things get really spicy. Wave 2 has 2 cruisers, 2 awakened escorts. They don't do anything particularly special, they are the triggers, but it also has a battleship called a Sleepless Watchman. Now the first thing you need to do the second that wave 2 spawns is figure out where that Sleepless Watchman is and get your traversal right the way up. I'm sitting here watching things, and I'm almost stationary as far as that that Sleepless Watchman is concerned. By time I finally decide that, okay, let's, turn things around and we're going to start approaching, it's already too late. 1 hit. That is all it took, and if I were to show you the kill mail, you'll see that that hit is more than the total HP of the Svipul in defensive mode. Traversal is king. Okay, so if that's how not to do it, this is a much better demonstration, and you'll see that it's still a little bit risky. I still stuff it up, and I've come in at a long range. Again, this time though, I know that Sleepless Watchman is there, I know where he is. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I'm in propulsion mode, and currently moving in the right direction towards the target. I'm then going to go straight into defensive. Those resistances are more important than the speed at this point in time. But you'll also notice I haven't put the Afterburner on, and I haven't started to pre-run the armor repairer. That's already a problem because I'm quite a way down my armor and I'm not closing that gap fast enough. My resistances are pretty good, and so you see that the damage isn't humongous. I do have the armor tank screaming in my ear that I'm dying though, but we're going to manually pilot in at about a 45-degree angle. Obviously the ideal angle is 90 degrees, but we're never going to get closer if we're constantly moving perpendicular. Moving at 90 degrees gives us the best option of closing the gap, closing the distance between myself and the Sleepless Watchman, whilst also keeping the traversal velocity, that angular momentum up as best as possible. And you can do this using the tactical overview like this. You can see it's a nice line there. I'm a little bit sharper than 45 degrees here, but screw it, it'll do it. Also, it should be noted that because I'm no longer in sharpshooter mode, I'm in defensive mode, my lock range has reduced down to 43 kilometers rather than 96, but there we go. I've also had to overheat the armor repairer for a bit just to keep up with that damage that I was taking whilst at range. Probably should have overheated the Afterburner as well just to get closer. They are different racks, so they wouldn't cause each other to heat up too much, but now that we're closer, you'll see that I can just keep up that angle. That's perfect. That's a 45-degree angle there. I'm now going to bring that in tighter so that I can spiral inwards. I'm closer, so I should be able to get that a little bit better. I'm really screwing around with my mouse there. I wasn't entirely sure what I'd done with the angular there. But we're now closing in nicely on that Sleepless Watchman, and you'll see that it is now Sleepless Watchman misses you completely. I'm close, I've got high angular velocity, the traversal is right the way up, it's not hitting me with that big nasty gun anymore. Whilst I'm moving, I'm also taking pot shots at the Awakened Escort. I've got the Tremor S currently active, which is, it's optimal to 36 kilometers, so we're currently within optimal of that Awakened Escort. We're doing quite nicely there, trying to get my angles all sorted here for the final approach on that Sleepless Watchman. We're going to use the whole look at as well so that I can track where the Sleepless Watchman is in regards to my ship. That Awakened Escort is now nearly down. Again, we don't want to take both the Awakened Escorts out just yet because that will trigger the next wave. We need to take out the Sleepless Watchman before the second Awakened Escort, or we're going to have wave 3 plus a Sleepless Watchman, which is just bad news. No two ways about it, that's bad news. But now that we're close to the Sleepless Watchman, I can hit orbit, and I've got a nice tight orbit set of 6,000 meters. 6,000 in specific because that's the optimal range of the Quake S ammunition. Once I'm in range, I can start shooting this, and I will be doing much more damage than I would with the Tremor. The Tremor will actually be missing at this point because it has tracking penalties. It's designed for long-range use. Once we're up and close, swapping to the Quake means we get better damage, better application, and we can start to rip that Sleepless Watchman apart and punish it for the fact that it killed my last ship. Even with the Quake ammunition, it still takes a while to kill that Sleepless Watchman, because artillery has, in this case the 280mm artillery, has fairly short cartridge sizes. It's only 20 ammo, it can be loaded at any one time, 10-second reload there, and a long activation cycle as well, which means we spend a lot of time just not doing anything. It's a single shot, then wait, then single, then wait, then single, over and over and over again until we have a long reload, and then rinse and repeat. Takes a bit of time, but it's okay. Once this is down, and of course we're descanning constantly as well, once this is down, we can now go back to the Tremor and start going for the kiting again. I'm well aware that when this Awakened Escort dies, we're going to summon Wave 3, and Wave 3 of this particular perimeter hangar is going to have 2 more cruisers, Awakened Escorts, and another Sleepless Escort, another battleship. Different types this time, but essentially it's a battleship, and so I need to be well and truly aware of that, preparing for what's going to happen. So again, Awakened Escort, I've got the Tremor now set, 36 kilometer optimal. I'm just going to slowly drift through space in a straight line in I'm approximately perpendicular to this thing. It's the highest traversal possible to take as little damage as possible. We're just going to keep moving, keep shooting until this is dead and Wave 3 spawns. I can see the Awakened Escort's about to go down, so I zoom right out for the tactical overview again, and we're going to have a look. The second that goes down, there's my enemies. Right, there are the ships. I need to make sure again, immediately, that I am moving at high traversal to that battleship. I don't want any delay here. I need to be as high traversal as I can be before that thing starts firing at me. Hasn't actually boxed me yet, but it will do, and you know, once that thing starts shooting, if I'm not getting decent traversal, I could be dead, and it will hit really hard. So at this point I've gone back into defensive mode because I don't care about that extra targeting range right now. I need to stay alive. We're going to start drifting closer at that high angle coming in, and you'll see again I'm shooting the Awakened Escorts first just because I can kill them on the approach. Hitting the Sleepless Escort from range, not really worth it because it's just not going to do enough damage. I can try and take these guys out on the approach, then when I'm nice and close to the Sleepless Escort, again we orbit at close range and swap back to the Quake ammunition and start punching it in the face with that. And that's basically all there is to it. You'll see that at this point in the anomaly, things are going much smoother. I'm taking less damage, nothing really is hitting me all that hard. The armor repairer is comfortably keeping up with that. I took a little bit of heat damage on the armor repairer, but not all that much at all. So we can, you know, as long as we're watching D-scan, things are pretty safe at this point. Not completely. I need to be well and truly aware that I don't just drift in a straight line until eventually that Sleepless Escort is again at very low angle to me. I do manually need to spiral inwards just a little bit, but we'll get there. We'll get there, and that Awakened Escort is now down to half of its armor and growing, you know, closer and closer to death by the moment. At this point, it's worth me just kind of pointing out that I do really like the look of the Svipul. Like, I'm not normally a fan of vertical ships like this. Strangely enough, I'm not a fan of the Vigil at all, another Minmatar ship that does the whole vertical thing. Not a fan of things like the Myrmidon, the Galente battlecruiser that again is very, very vertical. Yet the Svipul, there's just something about this. It looks kind of like an octopus or a squid. It's got that kind of elongated back to it, and then almost like the tentacles dripping down the front. Very Cthulhu-esque, I think, is what I'm looking for here, and it does work really quite nicely. I enjoy piloting this. It's, when it comes down to it, could I just be running these sights in one of my Tech 3 cruisers? Yeah, I could. But this is a lot of fun to do. Keeping up that traversal, keeping up that angular velocity, kind of teaches you to be a better pilot. And certainly having a Svipul that you are comfortable piloting for that day when a C-13 Wolf Riot connection opens up, oh yeah, that's where the fun really begins, because I will showcase that in a video when I get an opportunity to. The bonuses that you get from a Wolf Riot in a C-13 system. The armor tanking on this is insane. The amount of damage that the small weapons do is insane. You can make absolutely massive ISK. So it's a nice ship to have as a backup for those holes where the Tech 3 cruisers won't actually work. Finally though, we are now orbiting that Sleepless Escort. This is where, again, we're now pretty much on autopilot. All I'm going to do for the rest of this anomaly now is just spam the V key to make sure I'm not being jumped by anyone coming in. So I'm just going to descan over and over and over again, kill that Sleepless Escort, then at range I will then start to... Well, why am I talking about it? Let's show it. With the battleship down, what I've actually done is I've right-clicked on the mobile tractor unit and I've gone open cargo. I'm going to drift towards my own mobile tractor unit now, whilst essentially kiting that awakened escort. You can see it's 32 kilometer range. We're quite happily hitting that with artillery. One more shot and it should be down. Really nice and straightforward. I'm going to swap into propulsion mode so that I can get there just a little bit quicker now. I don't want to get there too fast because obviously whilst I'm shooting this, I want that traversal up. If I get to the mobile tractor unit instantly, well, yeah, I'm going to be suddenly a sitting duck for anything. But there it is, mobile tractor unit in the distance. We're now in propulsion mode. I've got the afterburner active. I'm not going to bother overheating it. We're going to keep going with the descan whilst we approach. Again, you can just warp out and warp back in, but I'm quite happy doing this at this point. I'm just going to watch that mobile tractor unit tractor in that last wreck there, so that I know that when I get there, I can loot everything in one go and I'm not waiting. See it there? Pulling it up at the last moment, just coming in nice and close. I'm 30 kilometers out, but that wreck is nearly in position. There we go. Watching it in the overview now, and you'll see that little box disappear. Boop, there it is. It's all inside the mobile tractor unit. So at this point, all that's left for me to do is just to drift closer to that MTU, loot everything, scoop the MTU, and then fly off to safety. I'll leave the bookmark here so that I can come back with a salvage ship in a moment and grab all of the extra stuff out of salvage as well. But otherwise, that's it. That is the Svipul in a C2 combat anomaly. Once you understand that playstyle, you can start running this in C2 combat sites. You can run it in the C13 Wolf Riot systems if you're lucky enough to find them. Otherwise, let me know how you get on with this. Tell me what I did wrong. Tell me what you enjoy about this ship. Let me know what you think. Happy sailing, folks, and see you all next time.